Hi, I'm Greg. Welcome to Affect Studio. I'm here to compare the sound and response of my Princeton Reverb when swapping the type of preamp valve or tube in the first position being the one furthest from the power tubes. We'll be hearing a 12A T7, 12A Y7 and 12A U7 alongside the stock and more widely used 12A X7. I'll explain more in a moment, but let's start with a clip of some power chords on my Les Paul running into the amp on 10. As always, I've recorded a DI'd guitar part which is then fed through the amp via a reamp box, so the only variable we're hearing is the tube. While I'm using a Princeton, the changes will be pretty much the same for most Fender amps and do similar things with other amps, assuming they have valves or tubes of course, useless on modelers or solid state amps. In that clip, the peak level of the 12A U7, which has significantly lower gain than the 12A X7, is only about half a dB lower than the 12A X7 due to the amp being pushed so hard. It does sound quieter though, as the average level is 2.5 dB lower. While the 12A X7 has become the tube most commonly used in the preamp circuits of amps, there are quite a few that are interchangeable without modification. Obviously turn off and unplug the amp before changing the tube, but as long as the pins are straight and you have it lined up correctly with the socket, you shouldn't be able to do any damage. The 12A T7, 12A Y7 and 12A U7 that I'm comparing are the next most common types. These are all dual triodes, meaning they house two gain stages in the one tube. Apart from sharing the vacuum, glass housing and heater elements that are needed for the electrons to flow, the two halves are electronically independent from each other. There are quite a few other tubes you can try, including the 12D-W7 used in some ampegs that combines half a 12A X7 and half a 12A U7 in the one tube. Next is a clean clip using my Danelectro. I'm going to play the clip through twice, once with the levels matched so we can hear the difference in tone, the other so we can hear how much the levels change. I should warn that not all 9-pin tubes are dual triodes. An EF86 looks very similar but has a completely different design. The EL84 used in the power amps of a lot of Vox amps, along with amps like the Fender Pro and Blues Juniors, 18 watt Marshalls and many others, is also a completely different design. Next is the amp on 5 using my SG Junior. With the change to blackface circuits, Leo Fender standardised the preamps, so there's basically no difference in the circuits across the entire range. The same circuit is used for the 3-watt champ through the 135-watt late 70s twin. The biggest difference is simply that the mid-control pot is replaced by a fixed resistor in the amps, so they only have bass and treble controls. Which means the changes we're hearing here would be pretty much the same for any of the black or silver face type circuits. The main reasons I can think of to try a different type of tube are firstly headroom. The amp will start distorting later, which can be very useful if you're trying to get a clean sound with a high output guitar. Second is the tonal differences. The third reason I can think of is to help control an amp that is too loud and becomes hard to adjust at low volumes. Probably not as relevant with a Princeton, but some amps, like a non-master Marshall, can go from nothing to too loud with the tiniest turn of the volume knob. A lower gain tube will shift the point where it's too loud to a later position on the volume knob, making it easier to dial in. Next is my Les Paul with the tone control rolled down and the amp on 10 again. So that's it, an easy and fairly inexpensive modification that is very easily reversed if you don't like it. You may already own amps with different types of dual triode tubes that you can try without spending anything. I regularly find gears almost right for what I'm wanting, and this sort of minor change is sometimes just what's needed. Having done this comparison, I think I'll try a 12A Y7 in the normal channel of my twin to soften the top end slightly and enhance the difference between the channels. So thanks for watching, please like and subscribe, hit the bell icon so you get a notification when I make some more of these, and I'll see you next time.